everybody. My name's Nicole Johnson, and you've joined us for the fourth in a four-part series about parent stress and diabetes. And we have had a great time talking about several different topics, from fatigue, which is what we just covered, to isolation and frustration. And now we're going to talk about family conflict. Maybe we saved the best for last here. Now, there's a lot of opportunity for family conflict in life with diabetes, around just living with the disease, around the management of the disease, around some of the role decision-making or shared decision-making around life with a disease, and then conflict with the person who has diabetes around their behaviors or their choices that they're making, whether they're young or they're old. So there's a lot to talk about in this topic. So Joe, we want to get started with you on this one. Why do you think there's so much conflict and family conflict associated with diabetes? We know that when families experience conflict, health outcomes are worse.
Yes.
But why is there still conflict?
I think the reason why there's so much conflict is because it's sort of built into the experience of living with diabetes. Parents are asked to take care of their child with a serious disease, and this brings up everything, every one of your unresolved issues in your life as an adult, to have to deal with this stuff. And many adult parents, when they have a kid who gets this disease, just go into tweak mode and to being worried about whether or not they'll be able to do as good a job as they would like to do. Or they're afraid that they don't have the resources internally to bring to bear to the game that, and how are they going to ask for help, all of this kind of stuff. So it's built into the diagnosis that there's going to be stress. When I meet with parents and families for the first time, I ask the parents if they love and respect and support each other. And they say, oh, what are we talking about that for? This is not marriage counseling, this is diabetes education. I say, I know, I'm just telling you that the more you love and respect each other and support each other in life in general, well, if you bring that, you'll need that in the diabetes management space. And the more you do, the less you do, the more trouble you'll have. And I say this, that if you guys work together well, then your children will do well. They did a study at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia about 20-something years ago, where they looked at 50 families at the time of diagnosis, and they wanted to see what things about a family would predict for the child's A1C and doing well and management and stuff like that. And they looked at all sorts of things, self-esteem, locus of control, and many other measures. The thing that they found most statistically significant in terms of impacting management and blood sugar control was the mother's sense of support and respect that she felt from the other members in the family as a wife, a woman, and a mother. Now, it doesn't mean that fathers don't have a role. It just means that in that study, that was the litmus paper that sort of gauged it. So how families deal with conflict. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to agree. It means that how you deal with conflict. When you have a difference of opinion, do you yell at each other? Do you berate each other? Do you storm out of the room? Or do you say, let's talk about this? How you deal with conflict will have everything to do, in my book, with your child's A1C and their management behavior, and how they come to terms with coping with it.
It's fascinating, the science around family relationships and how that interacts with family conflict and then health outcomes.
Yes.
Kathy, you know the literature so well on families dealing with disease and the stress around disease. What can you share with us as some examples from perhaps the literature or professional experience about how to reduce this type of conflict and what kind of resources might be available to people?
Yeah, well, what Joe just talked about, that study, and that's one of the seminal ones, is I think it's key when we talk about families to think of families as a system. We need to start there. So there is a child with diabetes, and that's sort of the center, if you will, but there's the siblings, there's the mom, there's a dad, there are other caregivers. If it's a single parent, the families are going to be different, and there's diversity in families, but families we need to think about as a system. So if we start with that, so everybody's a part of it, and if there's conflict, it's going to impact everybody within that system. And one of the terms that I like is family well-being. because sometimes we think of individual well-being, but there's such a concept as family well-being. And what impacts family well-being is spousal support. That's tremendous. It's communication and negotiating. So you talked about how there's going to be conflict. How do you deal with that? And as you said, do you yell? The idea is to communicate, to talk, to have some openness, and then have some willingness to negotiate. Another sort of strategy to use is to think about how you're perceiving what someone else is saying to you or what someone else is doing to you. So your child may forget to test his blood sugar or may forget to write down his numbers, and you may perceive that as being something he did just to get under your skin. Okay? What we need to think about is how to restructure that. And maybe he simply forgot. Maybe it wasn't to get under your skin, to really just bother you as the parent. So thinking about how you're perceiving what others do in your family and whether your perception is really accurate or not. And that's where that communication comes in, to really talk about. So you didn't do this. Now let's talk about why that happened. And, okay, so you forgot, what reminders can we put into place rather than, I know you just did that to make me angry, which is easy to get caught into that trap.
Oh, sure.
So that's a big piece of it as well.
You know, to your point about the negotiation, I'm wondering if you guys can help teach us, you know, whether it's role playing, however you want to do it, but teach us some steps in, like, the best steps in negotiation. You know, say there's a conflict between two partners about how they are viewing the diabetes situation in the family, and they're dealing with it in totally separate ways. And how would you negotiate something like that?
Well, let's say...
You're on the spot again.
I know,
No,
here we
it's
go
great.
again,
Yeah, I love it.
right?
This is what we do.
Well, let's say our son wants to go spend the weekend with friends, and I'm saying, and he's 14 years old, and I'm saying absolutely no way, because he's not going to remember to take what he needs. If he takes it, he's not going to use it. He's not going to remember to check. I don't trust the friends that he's going to be with. I don't know these parents. They don't know anything about diabetes. So, no, I'm not going to let him go. And I don't really care what you have to say. I'm not going to let him go.
Well, here's the deal. I just wanted to let you know that you're not the only one involved here, and that both of us are responsible for taking care of him. And when you tell me that that's the way it goes, it makes me feel like I don't have any say in how things are to go. So what I look for and would appreciate would be is maybe if we agreed that we're going to listen to each other's different opinions, and then we'll come back in a couple of hours or maybe tomorrow, because we don't have to get this decided tonight.
True.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when you and I have arguments, we think that we have to get it decided right now.
Right.
You know, and I think more important, I'm hearing where you're coming from, and I also think, if I'm right, that you're afraid that he's not going to deliver.
Absolutely.
I have a sense that he probably will deliver, and that at some point we need to give him the opportunity to do that. So I'm just saying that my opinion would be that perhaps we set it up with some consequences if he doesn't, that we use this as a test run, you know? And then if he doesn't perform as he needs to perform, then we can say that he loses a chance to do it again. But that some of this would be on him as opposed to us having to. But, you know, I know that you're feeling pretty sort of intense about it.
I'm stressed about it, yeah.
Yeah, I have a thing about it as well right now, too. I want to, like, say, no, it's going to be my way, you know? But,
Well, are you okay with at least contacting the parents and making
oh,
sure they understand?
that's presumed.
Okay.
Absolutely,
Okay. All right.
absolutely.
All right.
It's not just that you go on your own
Right.
way and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I think what we're doing, right, to step out of the role, is
You're
totally
doing great.
nice. Yeah. Let's resolve some other issues as
Okay.
well. Yeah, totally. I think what we're talking about is actually listening and not having to stuff your agenda down somebody else's
Right.
throat, you know. But to sort of say, look, we need to problem solve this. So the first thing is identifying what each party's feelings are and thoughts are about it. The second thing would be, can we discuss it? Are we open to discussing it? You know. And the third part is to decide how far the process is going to go for that time,
Right.
and to give it a sort of limit, so that you're not there's not the fear that it's going to go on forever
Right.
at
Exactly.
that moment,
Right.
but that there's a sort of cap to it in a little bit, which also puts a little bit of a cap on the fear that I won't get my way.
Right.
Because I think most of us are afraid that we won't get our way, you know? And that when there's a third party, the kid involved in it, you know, I think I know what's best, you think you know what's best, and the thing is that really we know what's best together.
Right.
And that
Right.
since we got married, we had a kid, we made an agreement, unconscious and conscious, that we're going to work together to raise this kid. You know, so I think those are the things that parents need to sort of consider as they're discussing this stuff and thinking about it in a way that's not my way or the highway, but how can we make it work for our son so that he has the best opportunity to unfold into his life.
And I think the other piece of that, which Joe did beautifully, was to say, we don't have to decide right now. Let's come back, because we recently just talked about fatigue and sleepiness and irritability and not being able to make good decisions. So if in that moment you're so emotional you can't make a good decision, then you step back.
And I also think people who are managing the diabetes, they feel like, I just want to cross this anxiety off my
Now,
list of
right,
thing to
right.
do, so let's
Yeah,
resolve it.
right.
And that's not necessarily the best way to go
Right.
about
It's
it.
interesting,
Yeah.
you're mirroring a comment that's online here, that one of the parents has listed that they make sure to have the conversation when their emotions are not too high.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we're
Yeah,
saying,
right.
so we
You have to
appreciate that
step
comment.
back. Right. And once the parents come to an agreement, then you want to bring the child into the discussion and the negotiation as well. So that's the next step in the process.
Now, there is an interesting question that's come up here online. We've got a lot of active folks here about modeling behaviors.
Yes.
And what do you do when you're in a situation where maybe there's another family member who has diabetes, type 1, type 2, whatever it might be, and they're not modeling good behavior? How do you handle that? Has anybody dealt with this?
Two diabetics?
Yeah? Not necessarily children. Maybe it's a grandparent who
I-
also has diabetes.
I
or-
deal with it, a lot of times there are parents who come in where one parent will have diabetes and the spouse is in trauma, the one who doesn't have it, because they're so afraid because the spouse who has diabetes isn't taking care of themselves. So the modeling comes up in a sort of negative way. And what I like to do to sort of set the table, make everything clean and put it on the table, is say, listen, we're not here for your diabetes. Your wife has shared with me that from time to time you don't take as great care of it as you need to or should or whatever, but I promise you that all of these sessions here are not about you. They're about, I'm happy to offer help and suggestions if you would like some, but this is about how to best help your child. So it would be better if you could model some positive stuff. And, but I'm saying perhaps you'll need to take a tack of that, I'm me, but I'm your parent, and this is what we expect you to do if you can't bring yourself to do better in your diabetes, because I think that's a very personal thing, and we're all on our own time schedules as far as it comes to, when it comes to that, But it's very difficult, and I think the impact of negative modeling on the part of a parent who has it for the child can be devastating.
And even some of the questions are getting to type 2 versus type 2 modeling of behavior versus a person with type 1. And I mean, this has so many issues in it, from the misunderstanding of the forms of diabetes to different cultures and different patterns of behavior. But it does become difficult at large family gatherings, if you can imagine family reunions or weddings or whatever it might be, where there might be an elder who has type 2 diabetes that doesn't quite see the life of the person with type 1 the same way.
Yeah.
What do you do in that kind of situation? I mean, I've been there.
I think you just, you do your best, as we were talking about yesterday. You do your best to fill your child with love and support and a good sense of themselves. You teach them what they need to do, and when they see somebody doing it differently, you can say to them, well, and they say, but how come he's doing that, or he shouldn't be doing that? You'll be able to say to them, well, that's not our family. This is how we roll. That's how they roll. People do things differently, and we're not the masters of everybody.
Right.
It would be nice if we could make sure that Uncle Tom doesn't lose his leg by drinking that much or by eating all that lemon meringue pie or whatever it is, you know what I mean? But the thing is that we love him, and people do things differently. So it's a big lesson,
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of identity, in terms of where you're coming from, in terms of control, in terms of,
Right.
yeah.
I don't, for my son, he's type 1, and he looks at somebody that has type 2, and I might have contributed to it a little bit, but we look at it as type 2 as you have choices to make. You could correct your patterns.
Yeah.
Type 1s, they don't have a choice. They have it. They can't do it. They can't eat better. They can't exercise and cure this almost. Take one oral pill a day. I mean, that's so. My son looks at a type 2 and says, "That's your own fault. The stuff you got working." So he doesn't necessarily care if that guy's not testing or not taking care of himself.
Yeah, it's interesting.
He takes it on his own that this is my disease. I'm going to manage my disease to the best of my ability. And he looks down on type 2s and not, well, a little bit.
I'm
You gotta sensitize them.
in a more unique situation because Robert's 19 and tomorrow will be his diet birthday. Will be his anniversary is 3 years tomorrow, and then Peter's the 25-year-old who was more recently diagnosed. And Robert's a perfect diabetic. I mean, if you have to be Robert is awesome at it. He's so good. And then there's Peter. He's a little older. He's going to stop drinking. He's a little bit in denial of what can really happen to him. He hasn't accepted it fully. So the pressure's on him to be as good as his little brother. Like, look at the way Robert does it. You know, Robert's so good at it. You know, you can tell that when Robert was diagnosed, some people were very insensitive. They said, "Oh, thank God it's not Peter because he's so flighty." You know, these kind of comments. And I'm thinking, there's no good or bad child to get at one versus as a mother, but the pressure I think he's feeling to live up to Robert. And everybody's different. But as a mother, I worry myself crazy because time is not your friend. You know, you want to be as healthy as you can, as much as you can. You know, that goes if your child has diabetes or not, but they do have it.
You're
So
bringing up an
changes.
interesting topic of sibling conflict, and this
Yes.
is all underneath this banner of family conflict, you know, from the differences in the level of attention that's paid to the children, to resentment that can sometimes creep in to that sibling relationship. Can you all share a little bit about the importance of working through some sibling issues?
Again, it goes back to that family well-being, and I think there's often so much attention on the child with a chronic health condition, and sometimes that attention is taken away from the child that does not have a health condition. So as parents, I think we need to step back and every once in a while kind of reevaluate and say, whoa, you know, this child may be acting up, maybe trying to get attention in more negative ways, and we need to think about why that's happening, and maybe we need to look at how well we're balancing, and what do we need to do special for this child as well. So I think that's a big part of it, that stepping back and saying, okay, you know, let's look, let's reevaluate, and let's look at how well or how well we may not be balancing. So that's one piece of it.
And as a diabetes nurse, I always invite the brothers and sisters to come in for all the educational sessions. They don't have to come in, but I extend the invitation to them to say that, you know, you're part of this.
Right.
And we want to know not only what you know, but we're very interested in how you're feeling and what's going on and how you're dealing with this stuff. At the initial diagnosis, 100%. I don't work with families unless I see the entire family. And then ongoing, you know, just to do a check-in, a spot check-in here and there to make sure that the siblings are getting attention paid to them and that their needs are being met, that they're feeling okay. And the same way that camps for kids with diabetes are a healthy way of making them have a self-image that's positive. I think that's why I love Children with Diabetes conferences so much, is that they have special programs for the siblings. And the siblings can talk with each other and find out, I'm jealous too. Yes, I'd
Yeah.
like to strangle my diabetic brother too because I want his Skittles and he doesn't share them. You know, that kind of stuff, right? There's all sorts of silly stuff that comes up, but silly important.
Right.
Yeah.
Really, stuff that you might think on your own is trivial, but needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
And
So let's get
yeah.
tactical about that a little bit. And I may be pushing you too far on recommendations, but for the families that are watching this and are needing some real step-by-step instructions, all right, so is it once a year that you want to see the siblings? Is it once every 6 months? What is it?
So I think for me as a nurse and been doing this for about 30-something years, the thing that's worked for me is to make sure that everybody comes in at the beginning. And then to check in over the course of time, but to make sure that the family has a plan as well for the siblings. Meaning that, do you spend in a week a set time, at a set amount of time, at a set consistent time, where you can be with your child who doesn't have diabetes? They need to hold to that. That, I think, is an important step. And why is that? Is because the reality of diabetes is that it's consuming. And it's going to take a lot of time. So if they know, though, that, well, okay, I'm not getting paid attention now, but in their minds they can go to their little island of where they do have their non-diabetes attention, then it's a place where they can go to all the time, you know, and deal with that kind of stuff. So to me, I don't think it's not necessary that the siblings come in, but I think it's necessary that I be checking with the families to make sure that things are going on, and that I encourage the place to be a place. The ideal diabetes clinic, I think, is a place where everybody wants to come back to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're right about
Where
that.
they had a good time and they had fun and they know that there's stuff going on that they wouldn't want to miss it. So I feel a little bit like an entertainer, and I feel like that's important to do.
Right.
To make the siblings, to make everybody have such a good time that the siblings would want to come back. You
Well,
know?
you know, and that's an important element, is that as we think through family conflict, humor comes in there, doesn't it? I mean, how have you guys used, have you used humor related to diabetes to kind of just simmer it down?
Oh, yes.
How?
Humor and bad words and everything. Like we were talking before, Mom, I'm so sick of my diabetes, and I'm so sick of your effing too, you know, and he's like, I can't believe you said that, Mom. I'm like, you can say it too, you know, because you know, and I always tell him too, if you have to have diabetes, get the perks, go get us in line at Disney World. Yeah, we you know, try to inject a little bit of that into it, because you are living it, so you might as well enjoy the perks, you know, which there aren't.
That's about the only one.
That's
It's
the
the
only one
fact.
there is.
There's that many perks.
Dealing with a sibling who doesn't have diabetes. So how do you guys deal with that?
My older son Jake is about 6 years older than Joe, so he was. I mean, they're very, very close. And when he went away to college, it was very hard on Joe, and I'm sure it was hard on Jake, but he's the one that's away. So we talked a lot on the phone, and they communicated a lot. Jake was our caregiver for Leanne and I when we would go out while he was in high school and stuff. He was driving. He would pick Joe up from school. We'd take him home, get him settled. Lee and I worked. We both still worked. So he was our shuttle. He would take me to baseball and basketball and help out tremendously. So everything was great. Then he went off to college, and then we got a dog to replace him, but the dog can't drive very well. But that's the thing, is they miss each other, and they talk diabetes, and they are very close. They talk diabetes, and his brother can ask him things that Joe will tell him probably that he wouldn't tell us as parents. So they have a great communication, and that's very helpful to anybody. You know, talked about the family dynamic. It's a good family dynamic that way, and it gives us a little break about it. And if it's something crazy important, Jake will say, hey, you guys need to look into this. So he's looking out for everybody's best interest. And you know, that's a very, very
I think
rare
as you're
occasion.
talking, the other thing that comes to mind for me as a sort of thing that parents could do is recognizing the extra work that siblings
Oh, yeah.
do.
Tremendous amount of
We
work.
just wanted to
Yeah.
thank you so much
Yeah.
for being so supportive. We know that you don't have as much attention, and we just want to know that we think you're a trooper, or something like that, where they end up getting, where they're acknowledged for the hard work,
Absolutely.
you know, for the extra effort.
Yeah, and
I
it's a
think
lot.
that kind of needs
Yeah.
to happen for every person in the family in unique ways, doesn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
Totally.
Because everybody's dealing with some element, and it's impacting each person on a unique level.
Yes.
You know, Arcelia, so you and I experienced diabetes as the only caregivers in the family, the single moms. That makes family conflict look and feel different.
Well, the children and the boys and I are very close because their father died 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get real mad at him. I take my frustrations out on my late husband, like, how dare you die and leave me with this problem? Because who loves your children? He loved them as much as me. At the beginning, when Robert was diagnosed, every time Peter would call me from college, I was all obsessed with diabetes. One day, Mom, what's up with the diabetes crusade? It's like, how dare you say that to me? you know, and he didn't understand. He just thought I was obsessing about something, and I was obsessing about it, you know, because I should have, I know in retrospect now, or I should have, would have, that's not really my vocabulary. It's just a learning point, and since we are so close, the three of us, you know, I would take everything out on him. I would tell him everything, and he's considerably older than Robert. Like your children are, they're about 6 years apart, and he's like the big brother. But he couldn't realize what we were going through, and he wasn't there. And as little as he got to learn about it and see Robert doing it, Robert sort of became his hero for a little while, and that dynamic changed. His admiration for his brother grew, and as a mother, that's all you want, right, Sam? Right, that's all you want. So I think that my situation might be a little unique in that. And plus, I'm sort of really hardcore mom, you know. I have this mantra that says, I'm your mother. When I'm right, and when I'm wrong, I'm still right, because I'm your mother.
I think as you're talking, the stuff that comes up for me in both of your situations, one is that I think the thing that came out in that study on the 50 families and what contributed most to was in single-parent families was the support network that single parent had. And Ursilia and I were talking about communities of support, you know, yesterday before we did the thing, and how important that is. And she was talking about how important that is for her and how it charges her and energizes her. So I think for single parents, that's a big issue, because you have to be the good cop and the bad cop at the same time, and that's exhausting, right? And it can lead to conflict, you know, and that's a firewalk. And for you, Nicole, in terms of being a mom who has a diabetes but with a child, I think if you're the caregiver, I think it begs the question of to what extent do I take care of myself first, and then how do I, and you know, it's sort of like, it's trite, but it's like the sort of thing in the airlines, right, where they say when the oxygen thing come down, put yours on first, you know, and then deliver help to your little baby, you know, or child. But I think it begs that question all the time, like you were talking about before, in terms of I'm low, I need to take care of myself, but I need to get dinner ready. You know, and I have somebody else's concern. So having to take care of yourself but being a caregiver simultaneously, I think takes a tremendous amount of effort. And I think it's worth talking about, you know, that as a way of relieving stress and just checking in and getting the support that people like yourself need, and other people who are in the same situation. These are all things that need to come up that I think that if you don't have the right resources in a diabetes clinic, get ignored, particularly for adults.
You're right.
Yes.
Well, that's a good way to wrap this up, is that you deserve resources. No matter who you are, living with a person, loving a person who has diabetes, regardless of how old that person is, you deserve resources to help you have the best life possible, and then to help that person that you love have the best chance at the diabetes outcomes that we all wish for. Because if there's family conflict, A1Cs are not as good, the end result of diabetes is not as positive as we want it, and we know that from so much research and so much science. So this topic has been delicate. We've had some fun with it too. I think we'll probably continue our support group meeting here after the webcast. But we appreciate you for tuning in, for contributing your comments, and hey, maybe even let a couple people know about the diabetes pass at Disney that they didn't realize existed. So go get that pass. But most of all, families, make sure you're taking care of you. Thanks for being a part of this.